Hello everyone. Team MyNEP is interviewing Professor Dr. KK Agarwal sir today on two very important issues of the day. The first is related to STEAM education, and second about his organization. He is also chairing National Board of Accreditation. Professor BVR Reddy is the interviewee for the whole program today. Professor BVR Reddy is currently working as professor at University School of Information and Communication Technology, GGSIP University, New Delhi. He is also the chairman, Centralized Career Guidance and Placement Cell of GGSIP University and program coordinator, GGSIPU NSS Cell for the university. He possesses an excellent academic track record both as teacher and as a researcher, besides administrative acumen in technology areas of ICT. Been in service for the last 30 years. Earlier, he served in various positions as Dean School of Engineering and Technology, Dean of University School of Information and Communication Technology, Dean University School of Architecture and Planning, Chairman and Librarian for University Information Resource Center, served at National Institutes of Repute as faculty at NIT Kurukshetra and NIT Hamirpur. His current research interests include wireless communications, which include mobile, ad hoc and sensor based networks, computer communication networks, semiconductor and VLSI circuits, and microwave and optical communications. He has more than 110 publications in international, national journals, and international conferences to his credit. He produced 13 PhDs and currently supervising 4 PhD scholars. Besides, he is a fellow of IET, IE, IST, and a member of other professional bodies such as IEEE, CSI, SEMCEI. He is an active member in various committees constituted by AICT, UGC, NAC, TECIP, and NIC. He visited foreign universities situated in Singapore and China. He is currently actively participating in educational reforms and value-based education in tune with National Skill Qualification Framework and contributed to vocational education in the country. He strongly believes in holistic development and growth of the next generation children and dreams of a society where each and every species living on earth lives harmoniously, that is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Further, he strongly believes in to see glitter in the eyes of his subjects as an award, reward, or recognition. Over to you, Professor Reddy. Please continue.
Thank you for introducing me. Namaskar, sir. It's a great honor for me to welcome you on this platform, and I will try to ask you certain questions as a part of the interviewing process. But however, having known you since the last 30 years, um, I can very well understand the kind of exposure experience that you possess. It will be very difficult for me to put everything in this half an hour or 1 hour interview, but nevertheless I'll try my best to do it. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. For me today, I, my Guru is before me, a towering personality such as Sir Professor K.K. Agarwalji. He doesn't need any introduction, and the world of technology knows him as a pioneer and a visionary par excellence. It is my honor and a privilege personally for me to introduce Professor K.K. Agarwal, sir, who was my guide, my mentor, my guru, and I met him for the first time in 1991. Having association with him since the last about 30 years, I know him much closer than anybody would have known him. An able leader, a young professor of his times, a wonderful teacher, a researcher, author, editor, and a well-known personality in the field of reliability. Besides an excellent administrator, he is a human being at heart and has groomed scores of children like me. And I am one of the luckiest guys in this process, having traveled with him since the last 30 years. I feel personally I have some cosmic connect to have him by my side since 1991. Professor Agarwal sir has obtained his bachelor's in engineering degree from Punjab University and master's degree from NIT Kurukshetra. He did his PhD also from NIT Kurukshetra. After having a distinguished service of 27 years at NIT Kurukshetra, Professor Agarwal has served as a Pro Vice Chancellor, Guru Jambheshwar University, Hisar, for a period of 3 years, and then as a founder Vice Chancellor of GGSIP University, Delhi, for a period of 10 years. I'm lucky to have worked under him for the past 10 years and then currently another 10 years in the same university. And let me assure you, sir, you have founded a very wonderful university. And today it has been a success story, and somebody, whoever talks about IPO University, definitely talks about Professor KK Agarwal. That is how the university is known to be. He has been the president of Institute of Electronics and Telecommunications Engineer for a period 2002-2004. He was the president Computer Society of India from 2007-2009 and president of Southeast Asia Regional Computer Confederation from 2008 to 10. Professor Agarwal is a well-known researcher. He had more than 400 publications under his belt. And if I keep telling about his biodata, probably 1 hour will be required to give a complete biodata of him. The whole nation knows him. He's an international figure. So he's also currently the chairman of National Board of Accreditation. With this little introduction, I would initiate the proceedings requesting sir to enlighten one and all among us. And we would like to get this information from you with regards to how the national education policy can be implemented in this country sooner than later, having our own experience of having 4 to 5 education policies, but the results are not as interesting as what we are perceiving today. But we are all very upbeat about the new education policy. Personally, I would love to say that 80 to 85% of what we have been thinking since the last 10 years, and many of the academicians and administrators were thinking, all that has come into the education policy. Now we are at the midst of a challenge, how these interesting thoughts percolating from our governing personalities, the Prime Minister of India, the President of India, His Excellency, and the upbeat with which they have come out with, I think we will be all mincing no words. I'm all eyes and ears to listen to him yet again, though I heard him at least 1,000 times. The knack with which he presents is very good, very thought-provoking. He makes one think and presents the futuristic view of the subject he prefers to talk. May I request, sir, to take over and present his talk on, it was a talk earlier, but now it has converted to be an interview model. So to take on the questions on STEAM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths, in the light of its importance in the implementation of the strategy of NEP 2020. So, sir, the very first question I would pose is, we started with STEM and we are reached STEAM. So how is this journey? And please give us an insight of STEM to start with, and then STEAM, and how will this be a game changer for educating our children?
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy, for such a nice introduction. I think it's always a privilege in life to be interviewed by a student, because you always tell the students how to ask questions. You always teach the students as to how science of asking questions is so very important. Yes. And let me start with this. See, our education system in the last 70 years has practically forgotten the question asking science. We had all come to the level of answering questions. There's a question paper and student will see the terror. when he looks at it, you can see in the examination hall how students are praying the God before looking at the question paper as if heavens are going to fall as to what is written there. Because all the time we made things so frightening that questions are here and now it is for you to answer. You have no business to ask questions.
True.
That is where we made, I think, the most fundamental mistake in education. And before I really go to STEM, I am therefore very happy that this particular policy for the first time has started its thought process from early childhood education, ECCE. Why ECCE is so important according to me? Because that is the time when the student has the potential to ask maximum questions in life. Because at that time he doesn't mind asking so-called foolish questions. Now, Professor Reddy will think many times, is this a right question to ask? Well, that kills half the spirit of asking questions. Every question is the right question. Answer may or may not be the right. So therefore, that feeling is important. As a matter of fact, one statistics tells me that a 4-year child, just a 4-year child, on the average, asks about 73 questions per day. Imagine 73 questions per day is the amount of questions which a 4-year child normally asks. These questions may be, why am I standing here? Why shouldn't I go there? Why should this be done? Why milk is hot? Why it appears hot? I mean, these are the questions which lead us to answers of life and which we are spreading. I was reading this story of a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1944. And when he was giving an interview, he was asked, how did you get the Nobel Prize in Physics?
Okay.
He says, sir, I got the Nobel Prize because of my mother. He says, how come? Your mother? Is she a physicist? She says, the scientist says, no, she's neither a physicist, nor has nothing. She doesn't even know the name of the Nobel, but she taught me how to ask questions. Every day when I come back from the school, every other parents will ask their children, what have you learned at the school? It is only my mother who will ask me, did you ask a good question today at the school?
Right.
And that training, that did you ask a good question at the school, made me going, and ultimately I reached the level of getting Nobel Prize in Physics. So why I am trying to raise this, friends, is I think one of the very basic fundamental mistakes which we did in the education policy for last 70 years or so, we just eliminated the subject of asking questions. We only concentrated the whole thing in giving answers. Asking questions was completely missing. Before again I go up, because it's important, I think, I once even read a study. Some professor in reaction engineering in Texas University in USA came to the examination hall. He says, today I have forgot to bring the question papers. What the hell? What will you do? He says, okay, but you write any question you like. You write any question you like and answer it. Students were damn happy about it. Write any question of your choice and answer it. Says, sir, what? He says, but I'll not to give you any grades on the basis of the answers. I'll give you grade on the basis of the quality of your question. Is
Right.
the question pure memory type, pure recall type, design type, analysis type, synthesis type? That is for you to decide how to make a question more complicated, which requires more depth of knowledge, and that's how on which I will grade you. So these are the kinds of experiments which have been done in the world. And when we came to science education, this was just necessary. Science is basically a question of asking questions. If we don't have query-based mechanism, it's only in science where a research student can tell his guide and very rightfully, very authentically, and very affectionately, sir, I don't think you're right. You can't do that in any other field. Now, because unless you do that, you don't take science to the next level. As a matter of fact, I read an article which says Indian science suffered many a times because our students were trained to be more faithful than they should have been. See, we as a society were told to be, I'm not saying it's bad, but we were told to be so respectful, so following the teachers and all that. And therefore, the knowledge expansion had a bottleneck. And the article very beautifully says one of the methods that when the Indian students go abroad for first 6 months is to start questioning the guides, to start fighting out with them. No, sir, you're not right. I'm right. So that's the art of asking questions. Now, when it comes to science education, I don't think this concept STEM education to begin with, STEAM was of course became little later, started several decades ago. It's not a very new phenomena, the name wise education. Now, if I consider this as a analysis of this name, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, please just look at it. What is so common between science, technology, engineering, and mathematics? I think the only common thing was that you have to look at several disciplines together to solve a problem. You can't solve a problem as a pure scientist. You can't solve a problem as a pure technologist. You can't solve a problem as a pure mathematician. You will have to apply the several subjects together to be able to solve the problem. And that is how STEM terminology was evolved. And so when I consider, because I read a lot about STEM, I think some of you might know, we brought about 2 years ago a report at the auspices of Vivekananda International Foundation on STEM education. That was much before NEP. And my whole thrust was STEM is not a subject. STEM is a philosophy of education. STEM is increasing inquisitiveness. STEM is increasing multidisciplinarity. STEM is applying science to solve a technological problem, apply mathematics to solve an engineering problem, and so on and so forth. So it was discovered first in USA, UK, etc. And then it came all over the world and it became an important philosophy. And all the world considered important because life's problems could only be solved if we put it together. Because if we don't put it together, things don't work out. Then it was very soon realized, well, STEM is fine, science, technology, engineering, mathematics is fine, but are these four terms the end of the education spectrum? They are not. And unless you put people together along with them, then these subjects also won't give results. I'll give you an example. Even where have you put the engine in the car so that the mechanic finds it easy to open? Now that's nothing to do with automobile engineering, but that is for the ease of convenience of the mechanic. That has to be seen in mind. I'm a computer scientist, so is Dr. Reddy to a good extent. We always believe my making computer very sophisticated is not going to serve the society. If I keep on using the same computer, which depended upon their basic inherent knowledge, society is not going to be gaining too much. Therefore, we must design ways and tools where the things become easier for others. So very important signal which I wish to draw here is the STEM philosophy always believe I may work very hard, but I will ensure your life is easier. Today, if you see touch screen, could anybody imagine that such a sophisticated technology like iPhone will be used by somebody who is completely illiterate? Now, that's the beauty of STEM philosophy, that our technology may be very sophisticated, but use should be very simple. That's where we came in. And Steve Jobs is one person who came into the fold and said, well, I don't care about the power and everything, but aesthetics must be good, touch screen must be good. And then people started believing unless we put other subjects together, and when we started putting other subjects together, several things were tried in the world. One was make STEM into STEAM. And when we said STEAM, it means add A means arts. Because without the arts, you really don't deliver. You may design a very sophisticated electronics instrument, but if that electronics instrument is such that the child has to call his mother to operate the knob, then it will be useless. So you have to put the arts into this, and then the people took very sophisticated researches in the process. I'm sure most of you heard of the world's best portrait, Mona Lisa portrait in Rome. Somebody, computer scientist, took a deep study and published a paper that Mona Lisa's smile is 83% happiness, 7% anguish, 3% despair, and so on and so forth. Now, people may ask, what is so great about this analysis? Now, great about this analysis, how do you study the various patterns of how the people laugh, how the people smile, how the people behave, and so on and so forth. And therefore, A came to be embedded therein as arts, because it was felt if we sort of divorce arts, we will not achieve what we wish to achieve. And A was done. But just to mention before I conclude, some people were not very happy with A as arts. So therefore, in countries like India, they say, no, A should stand for agriculture. I'm not disputing them. Agriculture is important for us also. And ultimately, we have to use agriculture for betterment of the society in this country. And in USA, they also designed a term, a STEM with double M. And where double M meant mathematics and medical science. They say medical science also has to come together, then only it will happen. So say various versions came in, but the most popular version today is STEAM, science, technology, engineering, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And again, I repeat, according to me, the signal conveyed is what is written very elaboratively in the policy, multidisciplinarity. This acronym itself tells you multidisciplinarity is the way of life to which we have to go to. Sorry for a little long answer, but I thought let me.
It was very nice, nicely answered, sir. So I think I have understood the pulse that we have already made compartments. We have segregated ourselves into different streams, and seldom we are interested in the word multidisciplinary, because until unless multidisciplinary things doesn't come, I think we will not be able to progress faster. Now, with this mindset across the country, among the faculty, I know for sure the way you conceived the university, you wanted multidisciplinary research to grow in this particular campus of IP University also. But we also tried that industry should be a part of this particular process. But even after 20 years, it seems nothing has happened. Now, the question is, how difficult or easy would it be to convert this into STEAM, education in a fixed time frame, considering that our hitherto education has been mostly in separate institutions, separate compartments, even if it is an institution, separate compartments. Sir, what would be the points that you would like to spell out so that this becomes a reality within the next few years?
Uh, Dr. Reddy, I would feel this is a mindset. If we, as long as we keep on following that let there be a piece of paper coming from UGC which tells me how to introduce multidisciplinarity. Let there be a piece of paper coming from AICT which tells me how to introduce multidisciplinarity. Nothing will happen. Let me assure you, I will ask you a counter question. Give me a piece of paper where UGC stops you from introducing multidisciplinarity. There's no piece of paper there also. So the point is, we will have to start taking bold steps at our level. Let a multidisciplinarity become a culture of institutions. And second thing, I will be quick to add, I think one of the problems which happens in a very large and diverse country of this size is when we will say from 20 to 1, every university should become multidisciplinary. I think then people like me will take 5 years to explain to them what is multidisciplinary.
True.
Let us say, okay, those universities who want to become multidisciplinary, please come forward. We'll give you all support.
Right.
That's my model, because there's no need for all universities to become multidisciplinary on day one. Ultimately, all should become, but let them evolve themselves, let them learn themselves, and people do learn from each other. I think you would remember, because you were there with me almost from the beginning of IP University.
Sure.
When we introduced that you can study more credits than you required for a degree, nobody in the country was prepared to believe. How can you fail in one course in mathematics and still get an engineering degree? I mean, I know in my own academic council, I faced these questions, but then I said, so what? So what? Heavens are not going to fall. And we succeeded. And today, after 22 years, this is a part of NEP. So I think one of the things, I'm sorry if I'm exceeding my brief, but I think one of the things which we'll have to very cautiously exercise is education is an evolution. Education is not a revolution in most of the situations. It could be law based. For example, if you want to say that BA should be 4 years, well, that could be a law. But multidisciplinary, I mean, let us leave it to some universities in each state, in each part, to decide where they want to become multidisciplinarity, and let them go ahead and do that. People don't even know the meaning of multidisciplinarity. What the people say multidisciplinarity means, sir, in MSc Physics, I have started giving an elective from chemistry. So this is multidisciplinarity. That's wasting an hour of physics also. That's not multidisciplinarity. The best example of multidisciplinarity which I had from the word is when I went to deliver lectures in Kennedy School of Governance. And when they were giving a degree in governance, which is a real interdisciplinary course, they said, sir, Professor Agarwal, but right from the beginning of the school, we have decided Economics 101 plus Civics 101 is not Governance 101.
Okay.
Meaning thereby, putting some topics of humanities and some topic of economics does not make it governance. Governance has to be make it a mindset. So we will have to develop interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity as a mindset, and that probably will have to evolve gradually. We should be patient in getting it evolved, and until that time, even if both the models run separately, because particularly now when we have given complete flexibility of courses, what difference does it make that student X takes more multidisciplinary courses in University A and student B takes less multidisciplinary courses, student University B? What difference does it make? Tomorrow, it is the students of the other university which will ask their administration, sir, why don't you introduce multidisciplinarity? I think that's the only method by which we'll be able to work, by which we'll be able to take it forward. We say I was in a webinar the other day, and one teacher finally asked me. I didn't like the question, but he asked me, say, sir, this policy is too much for the students, but nothing for the teachers.
Okay.
I said, your question itself defeats you. If there is something for the students, teachers have got everything.
Yes.
Teachers don't need anything else if students are given. Why I am trying to mention this here is, let's make sure that the students drive the curricula, students drive multidisciplinarity, students drive the putting nuts and bolts in curriculum. And I can only assure you, and you know, with my experience at Kurukshetra, even at here, that whenever given students a responsibility, they have always behaved better than what we expected. And that's the model which we have to try. Then only STEM education or multidisciplinarity will come in a big way.
Sir, very nicely said. Taking cue from what you said about multidisciplinarity, I'll give you a small illustration, which we all know. We consciously know, unconsciously we know, but we never gave this importance to it. My son in class 7, he had a question to ask me. Who are the people who decide my scheme and syllabus?
Yeah.
Why am I put into this straight-jacketed approach?
Yes.
When are we going to change this education system?
Yeah.
In that light, he was also referring to having different options before him to choose from, and then a basket of things, which unfortunately our education system since the last 70 years has never thought about. Do you think this is going to completely change when we introduce STEAM, number one? And two, do you think this will be the right approach for the students to be allowed to take the courses of their choice, which you formally answered it earlier too, in this process? And do you think in the last 70 years, have we included students as the stakeholders in deciding what curriculum they have to have?
Dr. Reddy, very, very frankly, the answer to all your questions as of date is no. The university schemes and syllabi have invariably been drawn by a group of 5-6 professors, a couple of them from the universities and a couple of them from neighboring universities, to decide. We never involved what to talk of students. We never even involved the teachers in the whole process. And when it came to an affiliating university, except with the exception of IP, if you remember, the teachers were also never involved in the university system. So we had a system where somebody in some annexee of the vice chancellor's office will write a syllabus, and then that becomes a dictum for all teachers, for all students to follow. And there was no scope for any deviation in that whole process. And again, I would repeat, that was killing. Now, when you say, can it change? Yes, it can change. Yes, it will change, but let us facilitate the change. For example, when you gave the example of 7-year-old child to choose the questions, yes, he should be allowed to. The second question which you have is, can he have the complete freedom? Well, there you have to introduce, again, I'm sorry that step is not there in the NEP, although I have written a couple of articles on this, that we have to introduce the concept of faculty advisors in a big way. Every teacher will have to be trained as a faculty advisor, because students otherwise might behave an immature discretion. So it will have to be a joint discussion between the faculty advisor and the student. as to what can be studied, and so that which is meaningful, which can be carried forward, because otherwise some students may not exercise it very maturely. So therefore, once the student subject of faculty advisors is also taken seriously, and I think one of the most primary needs for implementing NEP is to do a lot of training for faculty advisors, how to become a faculty advisor. Let the teachers understand what is multidisciplinarity and so on and so forth. And but once that is done, then the students should be allowed to have a good call, good chance. And then also, see, we are conditioned to a mindset. For example, if I'm a electronics engineer, I never think electronics engineering is diode, triode, transistor, communication, this, that. I never think where can electronics engineering go beyond how in disaster management, in Bhuj earthquake, the submarine, the signal under the debris could be detected to find out is there a living life there. That's also electronics. That's what we have to see. Similarly, people did not, I mean, once I was asked to introduce a sports function, and I said, has anybody bothered? I think the cricketer uses more physics than we use as physicists. I mean, how does he decide with which speed to throw the ball, what angle to throw the ball? He does all those calculations which we do on paper. He does it on mind. Now, if that mind and paper start working together, then we'll be probably be introducing much better sportsmanship. So science of sports could be a subject. Science of music could be a subject. And I'm sure many of the advanced countries are doing this. That is why I am doing this. I studied something. You know, you have an obstacle race, and in the obstacle race, you jump this. There was a racer who was taking 12 steps between the two obstacles. His coach felt that if this 12 could become sorry, he was taking 11 steps. He says it could become, if it could become one less 10, then he could be faster. So he tried to make it faster so that between the two obstacles, instead of 11, he takes 10 steps and reaches.
Right.
And ultimately, we found the power, the performance spoils. Now, it's a very difficult question to answer, that you have made it faster and the performance spoils. And then later it was analyzed in the whole process. Now the racer was putting all the pressure on the right leg every time. Because earlier when it was even, the leg was alternating.
Right.
Now it was the same leg every time. And therefore the performance deteriorated. Now, is it not science? Is it arts? Is it sports? So this all will have to come in to believe in much better things to follow. And then when we talk about artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, is Internet of Things computer science? I hope you will have to say no. Is artificial intelligence computer science? No. So therefore, what are these subjects? And who will learn these subjects? And who has to be given these subjects? So these all will have to change. Things, I repeat, things may appear that there will be a lot of mess, there will be a lot of confusion, and how will we come out of it? And therefore, I again repeat, my caution is, let us do experimentation on a limited scale where our master experimenters are with a mindset of our choice, and then the things will take shape by themselves. We can't give it up. This policy has those ideas which are for the first time, and we have to carry it forward. But if we make it a massive order issued by a clerk, I agree with you that we may end up with the more confusions than this. So let's be selective. Let's go ahead. But STEM education is a prerequisite for multidisciplinarity, and that will have to come in. And also, when we go to STEM education for multidisciplinarity, for example, as a science student, we always had, are you PCM or PCB? That
Yeah.
was a standard question. There is no scope for anybody to be good in medical science as well as non-medical science. Now, unless you do that, who will design cathedrals? Who will design good cathedrals for human body? Who will design good hearing aids? Who will design good implants? And so on and so forth. And now 4-year course gives you at least one of the options. Let a student be equally watchful for bio as well as mathematics. This is one possibility at least. So this 4-year course gives you umpteen number of possibilities. Again, let every university not explore all the possibilities, but umpteen number of possibilities, and some of them can make a sea change in the education of this country, which we have to do.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. Uh, Taking further the discussion on STEAM, now we have very intelligently, we can call it as a ploy, over the decades, we created an education scheme and syllabuses in such a way that either we call them as curricular or co-curricular. So whenever we had a debate and we were not happy with something, we just pushed it into co-curricular. And to my mind, the co-curricular activities which really are required for personality development or a holistic personality development were almost shelved off. And by the end of 2020, I can vouch for they were not a part of any education model. So do you think STEAM is going to be inclusive of these aspects? I think NEP has already suggested there will be nothing called co-curricular. They will have to come to the mainstream. I think STEAM is in that direction also saying that. So should we consider these activities such as NSS or NCC, yoga, sports, to that extent that we talk about various fine arts or clubs, we call them? Should we also include them into the mainstreaming? Inclusive, when we say holistic and inclusive, STEAM takes care of all of it. I'm not literally reading the word letters of STEAM. I see it as a philosophy, as you rightly said, and a holistic model. I think, how do you see to include these things with the mindset of my own colleagues? I find it very difficult to push such an agenda. And then, yes, you rightly said, should it come from UGC? UGC has already put it on paper, but we are not even, we are hoodwinking, we're not taking them into serious effort. Is it not very important to have these components also for a personality development?
Dr. Reddy, you have raised quite a few points. Let me answer one by one. First of all, you talked about pushing the agenda. I think there are two well-known technologies in the world, which we call as push technology and pull technology. I think we should gradually trying towards being pulled by the students rather than being pushed by the bureaucracy. Because education is not something which is pushed by the bureaucracy, it has to be pulled by the students. I always give an example. Today we call about self-learning. When Guru Dronacharya told Ashwatthama, I'll not teach you archery, did he give up?
They did not. Yeah.
Well, Guru says, I won't teach you, so what the hell do I do? I go on Anshan, I go on hunger strike, I go on this. He says, no, sir, then your idol is enough for me. And he learned archery better than most of the other people. So self-learning is not a new concept. In STEAM education, I think one of the very fundamental mistake which we have done is introducing the ratio of practical content and the laboratory content. And if I make use the statement, I think JEE will have to be remodeled itself so that the students do not stop seeing the laboratories. I know of students who have never visited a physics lab or a chemistry lab or a bio lab in their 11th and 12th class. and then we expect them to be good STEAM science students. It will not happen. How do we find the ways and mechanism? That's a different matter. Now, as far as co-curricular is concerned, I think, Dr. Reddy, we again found it simple because we didn't, actually teacher has to work very hard to introduce any new solution. You would again remember when we wanted to start some new courses in IP University, I think at that time we were not joined. I made the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, who is the Chancellor, take a meeting of 25 topmost industrialists of the country who will tell us what courses should start. Because it is not my prerogative what courses should start, what society needs should happen. So that's how it has to be pulled that way. So when you said that we put it under co-curricular, I was in a college and some 5, 6 girls, quite in the evening, were sitting in the veranda, and I said, "What are you doing?" They said, "Sir, we are making a robot." I said, "Why can't you do it in the lab?" So lab doesn't give us that environment.
Mm.
Now, it's a very subtle signal. The lab does not give them the environment of freedom which they wish to. And once they get the freedom, they will make a robot. So we had to give them freedom. Instead of giving them the freedom, we said, no, no, this is co-curricular. You go and do it outside. So we have to kill that. And now co-curricular and curricular and yoga and this all will have to come together. You would again recall, I have always said, by definition, according to me, when we say 4 credits, it only means 2 things, according to me. Number one, how much effort the student has put in to qualify for those 4 credits. Whether that effort is in sports ground, whether that effort is in yoga center or whatever, or in the classroom. So how much effort has been put in, number one. Number two, has he attained the maturity level which takes him towards a higher degree? Now, once these 2 subjects are questions are satisfied, then according to me, every credit is justified. Every credit is justified. Come what may from wherever it comes, we should only answer 2 questions. Is he wasting time or is he learning something? If he's learning something, number one. Number two, is he putting in enough efforts compared to a student who is getting 4 credits in mathematics? Yes, and that's it. So once we learn to do these things, these will happen. And I'll again repeat, if this is asked to be done by all universities at the same time by a circular, it will fail.
Okay.
So let's pick up maybe out of 1,000 universities in the country, maybe 50, 60, 100, and start it. Give them 1 or 2 years to prove the success of the concept of the experiment, and then let others pull towards it. That's my model.
So you suggest that each state and each district should have one such university, which is trying to, yeah, it can be that way.
Whatever
Right.
way they choose, but it cannot be a mass-based change one day.
Right. It doesn't happen also like that. I think it has to be a considered effort. Taking cue from what suggestion you have given for JEE, I'll give you a small interesting statement that comes from IIT professors themselves, that the kind of examination under JEE they have done, they found that almost 1/3 of the students from Andhra Pradesh have qualified these exams. Because of the cramming mechanism or whatever mechanism they have adopted, 1/3 of the students have joined all IITs. Now, the practical knowledge is missing. And from there onwards, the IIT professors have started wondering, they know all the theoretical knowledge, but they can't put it into practice. That's what. I mean, do you suggest that we should also have an examination on patterns of USMLE where some practical questions are asked or live questions are asked rather than the rote questioning that we are doing today?
Dr. Reddy will have to change all that and again change it gradually, because this one shoe fits all will not work. You have given an example of Andhra students. I'll go a step further. They have designed an artificially intelligent system which can answer questions better than the topmost student. Now, if an artificially intelligent computer can answer questions better than the best student, then will we have a class of computers tomorrow to be IIT students?
Yeah,
We
it
have to
appears.
change that. And all this came as a game of numbers because we never trusted each other. We
True.
never believed IITs will make fair admissions if given a choice. Vice chancellors will make fair admissions given a choice. My only counter questions is why not? If I am worthy of being a director IIT, why can't the nation trust me that I will pick up the best students? And then let us see what happens. And again, I'm repeating again and again. Uh, in IIT, in IP University, in our affiliated colleges, I never sent university professors for the selection of teachers in their colleges.
Even Supreme Court has given the direction.
While DU used to do it and everybody used to do it. And many people asked me, I said, if the college wishes to select wrong faculty, what's the problem with me? If the college wishes to select the wrong faculty, what's my problem? Let them burn their funeral. Why should I bother? So I think we'll have to give a bit of more freedom, and more freedom will give them more responsibility. So we will have to rebuild the whole trust mechanism, more freedom mechanism. Mistakes will be there, but I again believe mistakes will not be more than what we have committed in these 70 years.
Sir, taking it further, data shows that there is a clear discipline-wise gender-based enrollment in sub-particular disciplines. For example, girls enroll more for teaching, medical professions, etc. And contrary, I may not agree, but engineering has a majority of boys. That may not be true. So what are the reasons for these skewed numbers and how can this be tackled?
Well, again, number one, this has changed quite a bit. If you look to say 3 decades back, I remember when I was a student of engineering, amongst the 5 batches of engineering, 1,250 students, there used to be only one girl. And things have started changing, but will change for the better. And second is because we always tried to stereotype the things that engineering means going on the shop floor. Engineering means dealing with the labor. Engineering means night shift,
Yeah.
so on and so
No,
forth. We stereotype those things which are not really true today. So we'll have to generate more and more awareness that engineering today is very different than it was. Teaching today is very different than it was, and therefore things will start changing. And I'm happy they have already started changing. I don't see it a very serious problem because I see within a couple of decades to even it out.
sir, I think you have answered it quite well. Now, Uh, like, for example, IITs are nowadays exploring and trying to give a push to other sides of the story, like they were concentrating on engineering and engineering related ones. Now, IITs have started offering humanities as well, but still a student of social sciences would prefer JNU or a TIS, or the same as we consider it vice versa. If a science student is, he will not go to JNU, or today, these days, they have started engineering, but then they would prefer IITs or NITs. How challenging is it to maintain the professional standards of these courses when we say we are converting every institution into a multidisciplinary institution?
Uh, Dr. Reddy, again, my interpretation is slightly different. I said when IITs should become multidisciplinary, that only means if some of the engineering students wants to take 3 courses on literature,
Hmm.
they should be allowed. It does not mean that every institution should start every degree.
Hmm.
That may not be the right thing to do. Some institutions might start some related degrees, but otherwise it only meant to put the things together so that the students have more freedom of choice. For example, I'm again making a very bold statement, which I'm normally used to making it. Why can't I see IIT plus JNU as one institution?
Okay.
And then everything is taken care of. whatever problem you raise, if I say IIT plus JNU, there is no boundary wall between the two. And this is one institution. So everything is taken care of. We allow more students to take more interdisciplinary courses because this feeling that engineering student need not study literature at all is also wrong, because sometimes we draw very great things from literature.
Hmm.
Again, you would recall in said when Mahakavi Kalidas wrote Meghdut, if we would have listened to him, cloud communication would have come 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier, because that was a concept. So that's how what we have to learn from each other. That is the concept of interdisciplinarity. Interdisciplinarity will not mean every university should start every degree.
Yeah. So taking slightly deviating from the basic concept of STEAM and the holistic way we are looking at it, one pertinent question which everybody one of us know, but it may not be the case of IP University, but that is a success story. Other than what I'm trying to question you, our higher education system has been starved for funds, resources, infrastructure, as well as the human capital. We face scarcity of dedicated educators and researchers. Our spending in research is awfully low when compared with other similarly placed economic nations. In such a crippling atmosphere as of now, how do you see our nation making a 180-degree turnaround or transition? What can the roadmap be for the same, taking in the light the STEAM policy that we're going to adopt?
Dr. Reddy, yes, country's economy at the moment is not as strong as it should have been, which is true of the whole world at the moment. But nonetheless, we will have to find more money to be pumped into higher education, including STEAM education, because education is probably too difficult a decision to be left to economics. I think we'll have to find ways and means. What do we cut to find this? We'll have to debate, and maybe I'm biased because of being academics, but I think our spending on higher education will have to change and move, and we'll have to find ways and means. For example, one thing which I've been saying, say, for example, since the private universities have come,
Hmm.
which are self-financing. Now, when we ask them to do PhD, where from do they spend money for PhD?
Yeah.
From the fees of the BTech and MTech students. So therefore, BTech and MTech standard goes down.
Yeah.
So is it that our priority? So I think one direction which the policy has taken is that we will have primarily teaching institutions, we have primarily research institutions, and we have primarily excellent universities. So I think let there be no stigma attached to primarily teaching institutions. Let them come up, and the country find more money to do that. But I must not shy away from saying country has to find more money for pumping into higher education, because that's not something which we can afford to ignore. And again, in another webinar, I was saying, they were saying that there are villages where children don't have smartphones. And therefore, how do they attend the classes these days? So I said, I think then let us rethink, is Dal Chawal only subsidy, or smartphone is also a better subsidy?
Right.
So we have to think under the situation and see what can be done.
Sir, from a very successful Gurukul system of education, which provided holistic, our education from the current school education or up to higher education, we by and large restricted to the chalk and talk model. Project-based assignments are limited and suffered from plagiarism. How big an impediment is that in including STEAM culture among our students?
Uh, well, in STEAM education, project-based studies will have to take a lead. They will have to come in a big way. You use the word plagiarism. I think plagiarism has come only because teachers are not vigilant. Because teachers themselves are not being vigilant. I know of many, many institutions where teachers say, go and do this project. They don't even describe the project. They don't even discuss the project. And therefore, the student is left with no option but to go to Jama Masjid or Chandni Chowk and buy a project. So I think teachers will have to be more vigilant. Teachers will have to be more careful and demanding, and this will go away. I was talking about plagiarism to a professor abroad, and he said, "Sir, Indian student frankly told me we were never told what is plagiarism.
Yes.
Therefore, we are used to it as a routine thing."
Yeah.
Now, I think we'll have to tell them that this doesn't make sense and you will have to suffer. You will have to do and then we'll probably have to do more hackathons, more real life projects, and so on. Why should there be only one national hackathon? Let there be every institutional hackathon, and so on and so forth, so that 36 hours on the ground they do something. So we'll have to devise ways and means, but project based learning will have to come in.
Right, sir. Sir, NEP 2020 specifically emphasizes on liberalizing education. They are very forthcoming in the ideas of STEAM and so on and so forth. But this idea seems very promising, but the contours for the same are not clear yet. What would be the broader framework of such a course, and what will be the scope in terms of different subjects being offered?
Uh, Dr. Reddy, again, I will say, if we try to define the contours at the national level, we'll be getting confused. Let us find the contours depending upon the strengths of each institution. For example, I just gave you, for example, in BSc, I can say, okay, you can take two majors and two minors. You can take one major and three minors. You can take a research semester, because if you want to go in for PhD and all that, take a research semester. If you want to go in for post graduation, let us take double weightage to that subject right now, because otherwise now PG is going to be 1 year, so he'll be half baked PG. The mistake which we did in case of LLB, LLM we made 1 year and we had to reverse. So we will have to think of various models, and again, not enforce all the models on every university. Let every university, supposing some university is very good in some things, I think let them chart out their role. For example, if IITs want to start a 4 year, say 4 year BSc program, let there be a lot of IoT in this, let there be a lot of artificial intelligence in this, and it will be very good BSc, data science in this. So let everybody design, let there not be a state jacketing of flyers. Because the moment I say that once you fulfill these credits, we'll do that. So let every institution have the complete freedom to decide what is their strength. And only thing I can assure you, and I hope I am proved right, students will make sure that you don't take wrong decisions. It may take a year, 6 months, this way, that
Right.
way, but they will make sure that you take the correct decisions. I give an example. IIT doing a BSc which focuses on IoT, which focuses on AI, which focuses on drones, will be a much better BSc than an ordinary Mufassal college. Now, for an ordinary Mufassal college in a smaller town, and if we give them a circular tomorrow, you have to shift to a 4 year BSc. What will he do? He doesn't have even classrooms. He doesn't have even teachers. Let them continue with 3 years and for a couple of years, and then we design a bridge course for him to come to a good place and do the 4th year. So some things like that I think will have to be thought of. It will be a local solutions, lots and lots of local solutions, but rather than a global solution.
Sir, taking cue from the push-pull concept you have been training, that students should be the one who should be asking for something. But sadly, neither our society, nor the parents, nor the teachers will allow the child to think on his own or take subjects of his volition. This is a mindset that science students always believe that arts and other subjects are very inferior and they are not subjects to be studied at all, in the light of either looking at the material growth or looking at cushy jobs or whatever be the case like that. Now, studying about history or policy or governance or economics, etc., is a must for anybody willing to develop as a vibrant, aware, and responsible citizen. In that light, do you think STEAM is going to be a game changer where the children can still explore some subjects on the other side, banking onto their engineering degrees or a medical profession, wherever they are into?
Yeah, I'll again repeat, STEAM will be a game changer. And again, I will say, take STEAM as a philosophy of game changing, not STEAM as a terminology, because we will change many things in the process. For example, I think one of the mistakes which we have done is categorization, arts, humanities, science, and thereby labeling the students. Anybody whose child is not being admitted into science, he or she feels as if some crime has been committed by the child and they have brought down the name of the parents. This has to go. So instead of humanities, art, science, let it be. It's a subject A plus B plus C. It's a subject X plus Y plus Z. It's a subject A plus B plus X, and so on and so forth. And let the others decide what to do. For example, in USA, from studying humanities in the first degree, you can go to a medical college.
Right.
You
Okay.
can. Why not
Right.
here? Now, here I was telling the other day, supposing unfortunately in the high school examination you fall sick night before the examination
Right.
by any chance. So, throughout your life, you can never become an engineer or a doctor, because
Right.
you will never get science to study in 11th and 12th, and therefore the question, now is that a fair system to do? So I think we'll have to go to component by component rather than group based theories, because group based theories have divided the societies. uh, Engineering, for example, we are both engineers, so maybe we respect engineering as a profession.
Yes.
But I have not seen ranking anywhere in the world, where out of the first 10 ranked institutions, 7 are engineering institutions. Why engineering should take that much over importance? You see the ranking of America, you see the ranking of UK, you see the ranking of Germany, ranking of France, ranking of any other country. I have never seen 70% engineering institutions in the first 10, because we overplayed engineering. It's good to overplay, but overplayed at what cost has never been analyzed. I think a time has come for us to analyze this.
I think the central idea you're trying to give is, let us make skilling, self-exploration, study of society and nature to be coming together rather than segregating them into separate courses.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so that's well taken, sir. So coming to the end of the questioning on STEAM education, I this question will be a slight repetition, but still I would like to ask you. We have started talking about STEAM education now as something critical for attaining 21st century skills.
20%?
What 21st century skills?
Oh, okay, okay.
That is what we are looking forward to. What would be the importance of subjects like music and dance, sports and physical education, languages and literature, vocational education into our new courses? Will they also be included mandatorily in the curriculum? I think you have answered it, that it has to be. Or should we have a separate accreditation, call it again a co-curricular model, whether we love it or we hate it, kind of a thing?
Well, I don't think we should always anyway have a separate category. We should all put it together. For example, I have given, see, why vocational education has not taken itself to that level in the country which we want it to be,
Yes.
because our child's father and mother is still not very happy with the child going to vocational education, number one. Number two, UPSC still doesn't allow him to write IAS examination, which is the dream of every parent in this country. Although out of 3 lakh, only 100 will make it finally, but it is the dream of every child. So on the other hand, my model was, let us teach the student all mixed subjects together. For example, let me teach him physics, chemistry, and TV repair. Now, if I teach him physics, chemistry, TV repair, he can write IAS because he has a BSc degree. If he
Naturally.
qualifies it, we are happy about it. If he doesn't, at least he is a good TV repair technician, because with a strong background of physics, today's TV repair is not old time. He
Right.
has to have a background of physics. Similarly, I gave another example. Uh, history, geographies, and tourism guide.
Yes.
Now, if I teach the student formally, why, without telling him whether it's vocational or non-vocational, history, geography, and tourism guide. Now, if you want to write IAS exam, please go ahead. If you clear it, become IAS officer. I don't care. Otherwise, whatever you wish to do, do that. But if you want to go into a profession, you will be the best tourist guide in the country, because you know history, you know geography. So that's how we'll have to design at the local level several combinations to make sure of the things, not straight jacket them, not give them brands, not give them group names,
Right.
and take them on individual strengths.
Sir, taking it to the logical conclusion of STEAM, I think you have rightly pointed out, though we have enthusiastically started courses on skilling, giving a bachelor's degree in skilling or a diploma or an advanced diploma in skilling, this is not translated into either jobs or recognition by any of the government agencies, including DOPT or others. I think through this, I would also appeal to all the government and the governing agencies to consider these skilling programs also to be a part of, rightly pointed out, why the boy should not be eligible to write an IAS exam. I think with this note, I thank you on the first part of the question answer session on STEAM subjects, sir. Thank you very much for giving us all the time for giving elaborate answers for all these questions. Coming to the second part of the, do you need a break, sir?
No, no, it's okay. No problem.
So you also don the mantle of taking the quality education and accreditation processes of the country. You are the chairman of NBA. And the initial question I would ask is, having seen NBA over the years, I also was a part of the evaluation processes. Throw some light on NBA, and really have we succeeded or successful in the procedures that we have adopted under NBA? And with that, I initiate the questioning on NBA. Right.
Dr. Reddy, prior to NBA, we had only one agency in the country which used to be called NAC, which used to accredit institutions as a whole.
Right.
And well, they will look at the university as a whole, college as a whole, and so on and so forth. Now, with AICT's growth and importance to technical education being increased like anything, it was felt that technical courses should have a separate accreditation agency. And to begin with, NBA came as a part of AICTE about 20, 25 years ago.
Right.
So the first philosophy of NBA was that we accredit programs. We do not accredit institutions, because we always believe that there could be a college which could be very good in civil engineering, but may not be very good in mechanical engineering.
True.
And the student and the parents and the industry has a right to know that. So NBA started with the philosophy of program-wise accreditation right from beginning. And incidentally, that is the trend world over also.
Okay.
Then we believe because that was a time when most of our, or not most, when quite a large percentage of our engineering students were going abroad for jobs and things like that. Now, when they used to go for jobs, some country will have their own rules, some country will feel that they should have this test and so on and so forth. So we located what we call as Washington Accord.
Right.
Washington Accord is a memorandum of understanding between a group of countries in the world. Today the number is 20. When India had entered, it was 14. So these 20 countries agreed that we will accept the graduate engineers from each other's country, provided they meet the certain essential conditions. And therefore, Washington Accord, for the first time, what they call as graduate attributes. That any engineer must have ethical skills, engineer must have communication skills, engineer must know basic sciences, engineer must have a knack of complex problem solving, and so on and so forth. So 12 attributes were listed, and the Washington Accord mandated you have to demonstrate us that the students of your country do have these 12 attributes before we admit you to Washington Accord. And let me tell you, Washington Accord is a very rigorous exercise. You are firstly given a sort of probational admission, then you are given two mentors who guide you for 2 years, then you are given temporary membership for 2 years, then you are watched, and then only you are given permanent membership. So we were assigned 2 mentors from Singapore and from UK who guided us. Then when they came here, they felt that whole world of these 20 countries does not have 5,000 engineering colleges. Now, if India has 5,000 engineering colleges and graduates of these 5,000 engineering colleges are made available in the market, then all the countries are sort of, So then they found a via media that to begin with, let Washington Accord only be for autonomous institutions. And when they say autonomous institutions, the line drawn was the one who can draw its own courses. So that was meaning IITs, NITs, universities, autonomous colleges, and so on and so forth. So that brought the number down to about 500, 600. So that is where we started Washington Accord, and then firstly temporary membership, and then finally we got permanent membership in 2014 for Washington Accord. But then we thought in the country that Washington Accord might say that, but ultimately we have to bring all colleges to the same level of quality of education. So we said, okay, we will follow the same norms. Washington Accord may consider only 600, but we will follow the same norms for all 5,000.
Right.
So that is how we called it Tier 1 colleges and Tier 2 colleges and went ahead and do that. Only for Tier 1 institutions, and the basic thrust is graduate attributes, which have been defined by Washington Accord, which have to be followed without any question. Now, one of the conditions of the Washington Accord was that this decision-taking body, NBA, should be completely out of the powers of the government, because they believe that accreditation is such a poised thing, it should never be influenced by the government. So therefore, we had to come out of AICT, made our own separate society, and create NBA as a separate unit by itself. which has practically nothing to do with the ICT, nothing to do with the ministry as it stands. So this is the history. And we got Washington Accord in 2014 after all those exercises. And thereafter, periodic reviews. In 2019, the team came here for a review. For after 6 years, they review for another 6 years. So they came here for review, and they review is to such an extent they go with our visiting teams to two of the colleges to see how our visiting teams work.
Okay.
They're physically present there, see how it happens. So they went to the two colleges and found everything is fine. And then they recommended that, well, India can be granted Washington Accord status for another 6 years. That is from 2020 onwards for another 6 years. And what I would like to share here, because you are on my NEP, that to be eligible for renewal, we need 14 out of 20 countries to say, yes, India is okay. And some countries get 14 votes, some get 15 votes. India probably, I'm not very sure of that, is the only country which got 20 on 20 votes. Every country said their system is so good that they should continue. So that is how we are now a member of the Washington Accord for another 6 years. So that is where we stand as far as NBA is concerned.
Thank you very much, sir, for the insight and inputs that are relevant and are needed for everybody to understand. Now, sir, when we talk about quality, we talk about quality to be practiced with passion rather than forced upon by somebody that you have to be a quality institution, so on and so forth. With the dissimilarities between a private institution, a government institution, or an institution of national importance, evaluating, grading them on the same parameters, how is it relevant and how is it so interesting the way we are considering apples and oranges together?
First of all, it is not exactly same. We have two levels, tier 1 and tier 2. For tier 1, the gradings are slightly different than a tier 2. For example, we expect more research innovation in tier 1 level. We expect more curriculum innovation at tier 1 and so on and so forth. There is some difference. But having said that, I fully agree with you. I think we have to do a lot more work to make sure that this is taken care of, what you're saying. Because a country of this size cannot expect same standards. See, in IIT, our unit cost of student is about 10 times than the unit cost of student in a normal private engineering college. Now, one may say cost is not the only factor for quality, to which I agree, but I also agree you need cost. No, I mean, I agree cost is no, cost only does not ensure quality, but without cost also you cannot get quality. So therefore, I have already given this sort of goal that we should maybe categorize institutions into several categories and decide the target goals for each category and then try and assess them on those bases. For example, I personally feel no reason, most of these may be my personal views, not as chairman MBA, that a private engineering college which started 5 years ago, why do we ask them, are you doing PhD or not? I mean, if they're doing, it's fine, but that should not be a requirement. So on and so forth. So the goals will have to be defined from stage to stage. We'll have to do from there. And secondly, Dr. Reddy, I think because you have been associated with the exercise, the whole process of accreditation is outcome-based education.
Yeah.
And outcome-based education cannot be defined universally.
Yes.
For example, what does Dr. Reddy expect to be when he does engineering degree and what KK Agarwal expects when he gets an engineering degree, the two may be slightly different.
Yeah.
And that difference has to be appreciated, respected, honored, evaluated. So that has to come in. Unless we are able to do that, which we're not at the moment been able to do that. As a matter of fact, somebody rightly said in a book of accreditation, our accreditation at the moment is everybody should learn how to climb a tree. Number two, everybody should learn how to swim.
Yeah.
Then you call a fish, say, climb a tree. Says, I
Doesn't do.
can't. Says, you fail. Come next year. Next year again, you fail him. And the fish never passes. Then you call a monkey, swim. Says, I can't swim. Says, you fail. Next year again, you fail. Now, on the other hand, our methodology will have to be, if you are a fish, and today if you can swim 100 meters, I'll ask you to learn to swim 200 meters by next year.
True.
If you are a monkey, you can climb a tree good so many meters. I'll ask you to do twice the height, so on and so forth. So we'll have to assess each, not only each institution, but practically each individual's strengths, and then try and bring them to the level of a better performance. As a matter of fact, I read a book, the first book on outcome-based education, which has been written by Spady. You may be surprised to learn it was not written by a higher education person. It was written by a school education teacher, and he's a sociology teacher. And she says very simply, says outcome-based education is very simple. Write on a piece of paper, at the end of this course, what do I expect this student to know? 1, 2, 3. And after those time, just ask, has he achieved it? Yes or no? If that is your, it's outcome-based education. Now, it's such a simple definition, and we don't practice it. But again, Dr. Reddy, because you are a strong believer in our mythology and Indian culture and all that, we had this. If your Guruji said, you have not learned Kathak still, that's the end of it.
Right.
Did anybody ever challenge his Guru?
No.
If he says, no, you have to practice one more year, you are not a Kathak. Judo karate, if the master said that you are not an orange belt holder still, work for one more year, and that's the end of it. So we had those practices where we believed in the qualitative performance objective measurement. I think we'll have to come to that, and that again connects me to what I said in the previous interview also. We have to start believing everybody in the system and then see how it goes. So I think it will, now of course changes have been a little slowed down because of NEP, everybody is expecting see changes in the accreditation process, and then only the remaining things should follow. So maybe things are being held on some time till it happens. But I personally feel, and the new policy also says, it's outcome-based education. You will have to go to outcome-based education. You will have to go to flexibility. You will have to go to multidisciplinarity. If you don't talk about multidisciplinarity, how will you compare different mechanical engineering students? Because CGPA will have much little meaning, because a mechanical engineering student might have taken 10 courses outside mechanical engineering. So therefore, all these things will have to be done. That process is slowed a little because of the implementation of NEP's higher echelon of 4 verticals. Once those 4 verticals come, we'll take on all this.
Sir, it is welcome to ask somebody to maintain their quality standards and work into that particular thing. Whether it is NBA, NAAC, ISO, or any other certification processes, they expect that each and every player in that particular organization, all the stakeholders, should know the supply chain mechanism starting from the starting till the end. And the procedure that they adopt is to just work out with the 12 points and try to make it into such a document that it pleases everybody, that everything is in place. But in reality, it is not so. Can NBA think of hand holding, identifying the faults, uplifting them, and helping them in this process be a better model, which will have a better effect of a win-win situation of right, improving the quality also, and such a mechanism will also help in improving the quality of the organization.
Dr. Reddy, as a matter of fact, you have uh, hit the nail on the head, because personally, I don't believe accreditation is a very good final end result. Final end result is good quality education.
Yes.
And therefore, my whole emphasis is that let's improve the quality of education, and accreditation will follow. If I have coached you for swimming, there is no reason on earth why will you not cross a length. So that's the philosophy. So what you are saying is perfectly fine. And therefore, at the moment, there are several things which we are doing. Even NBA is trying to train people for
Mm.
outcome-based education, because more important than accreditation is outcome-based education. People don't understand outcome-based education.
Right, sir.
I have told many a times, if you take a class for an hour, after coming back from the class, just take half a second and tell me, after this 1 hour, students, which of the 12 graduate attributes has improved or should have improved.
Yes.
If you can't answer this question, then OB education fails. Similarly, when you set an examination question paper, when you ask a question, you must be able to answer, when I'm asking this question, which graduate attribute I am trying to test. If you are able to answer these questions, then only outcome based education will help. So my emphasis is on outcome based education. And in the last 1 month, I think we have trained about 10,000 teachers in the whole country online, because online was easy, to on outcome based education. And my philosophy is we go outcome based education, accreditation, let it follow. Now, hand holding, as you say, there is a scheme which is implemented by AICT, which is called mentorship scheme. They have mentor institutions and mentee institutions, where they ask mentor institutions to take care of the mentee institutions and take them forward for uh, going ahead on outcome-based education and hands-on accreditation. Similarly, many universities also now have made groups of one good college called mentor college and 5 colleges called mentee colleges, and guiding them. So what you are saying has started happening, but I would agree it's a little too late, too less. Maybe much more has to be done, because ultimately, if such large numbers have to be covered, it will have to be done.
Sir, these quality parameters or the quality measures, everybody takes it with a pinch of salt, compares themselves with other institutions, so on and so forth. We have perfected the art of, I'll give a small example, that if a DEO comes to a school for inspection, the teacher is so intelligent that he says everybody who knows the answer, put the right hand up, and those who don't know, the left hand up. So everything for the DO appears to be so rosy and so good at the final day, but the reality is something different. And I have observed it many a times that whatever they push forward and showcase is not the actual thing that is happening. So it has to be the soul. Quality parameters are the soul of the institution rather than to showcase it and show somebody else on earth. I think that is my take on that, sir. Sir, I think with that, I'll go to the last but one question. Can India become in the forefront of creating a value-based education system for the whole world, rather than we following somebody's model of outcome-based or output-based? We have a very good, rich past, and we were the pioneers of educating the whole world. India being the country of seeds and well-educated people, can value-based education be the forefront of our quality measures, which we will showcase to the whole world that this is how we have to practice and follow education for a holistic personality development? I think truly our national education policy, which is conceived, truly reflects this kind of an ethos. And I would ask you to throw light on this kind of a model. But surely we'll have to go for value-based education if you want to really have a wonderful country following through. Because we have been developing law-abiding citizens. When are we going to generate conscious abiding citizens in our own education system?
Dr. Reddy, I don't think I can disagree with you. And as a matter of fact, I think no right thinking person can agree with you. Oh, sorry. No right thinking person can disagree with you. Because first of all, let me make an observation. Every country in the world does decide what has to be their USP to go to the top of the world. There is no other option, because you cannot be excelling in everything on earth to reach Mount Everest, because then you will probably keep on hovering around the base.
Right.
A long time back, USA thought that if they make the best road network in the world, they will be best. And they proved it.
Right.
Denmark felt just by milk products, they can control the world. They did that. UK felt only textiles can take them to the top of the world. They did that. UAE felt if they can control the oil of the whole world, they will control the world. And they did that. Now, when we have to reach the top of the world, which we are justified in doing so, what is that USP? That USP is our value system.
Yes, sir.
That USP is, whether some people may hate the word spirituality, but I don't care, because ultimately it means the same thing according to me. Whether you call it, as long as you understand the meanings and the context correctly, whether it's religion or spirituality or value system, it's almost the same. That is where we were very strong at. And that we have to continue to explore. For example, talking about education itself, we had such good practices. I said when all the 5 Pandavas went to the Guru, who decided that I'll teach Arjuna the Dhanushban, but I'll teach Bhim Gada? Not their parents, not the student themselves, but the Guru and the student.
Yeah.
So that system we had, and not had for 10 years, 15 years, 100 years. We had it for thousands of years. And
Right.
we've forgotten about it. We had a culture where the teacher and the student will jointly decide what to do. And let me tell you, there is nothing so-called very great Indianization about it. We had it because we were one of the good cultures.
Yes.
Even today, if you take your child to a cricket coach, sir, I want him to be cricket team. He say, okay, jao, leave it to me. He won't even ask him whether you want to be a batsman or a bowler. He will just make him pray and then decide whether he is good to be a batsman or a bowler. If a bowler, steam bowler, or a fast bowler. If fielding, leg side, offside, onside, he will decide. So it was always the coach and the student who used to decide. And that is why we could excel. Somehow, in the whole process, I mean, I don't say Gurukul can come back, because it's a game of numbers. Now,
That is acceptable.
But online education has given me a possibility that a pseudo Gurukul can come back.
Right.
Because we can now take additional courses and so on and so forth. So first thing I feel, Dr. Reddy, is that value education is not a desirable thing, is a must thing. And as long as we keep on talking about its desirability or otherwise, we will never be succeeding at it. We will have to take it as if it's a given thing and it has to be done. And let me tell you, there's absolutely nothing wrong in it. I'll give you some personal examples. I was in USA once, maybe 30 years ago, and some media persons asked me after my lecture in the university. There was one Indian also girl there. Media persons, at times can ask you bad questions. She says, "Sir, you talk so much about Indian gods and this, that, but how come Lord Krishna had to take birth in India? Lord Rama had to take birth in India. Every god had to take birth in India? How come? This is not understandable."
Okay.
Well, for a moment I flashed, but then I said, "We are in California?" She says, "Yes." I said, "I don't find mango here in the market." She says, "Sir, what are you saying? Mango requires a climate. Mango requires an environment, which is not there in California, and therefore it doesn't happen." I
Right.
said, "You have answered me.
That's it.
For God to take birth or reincarnation, there's an environment required. And that environment has to be first created. India has that.
Right.
Thereafter, how best we have made use of it or not made use of it is a secondary question. Some things we have not made best use of it. I agree. But that doesn't take me away from the question that why did they happen here? Because there was no other place for them to happen. Even I go to somebody's house whom I like. You can't force me to come to your house. So that's the first thing. So India has a potential ground, and forget about any religion. How many religions have survived here? How many religions? And with full dignity. India never did not allow dignity to any religion. All differences should persist. All different points of view should persist. And good things of all religions should come together. People have written books about synthesizing good of all religions and so on and so forth. So therefore, if if we have to become uh, a USP, if we have to find a USP, it will have to be the value system.
That's
As a matter of fact, other day I was talking to uh, Shri Sunil Ambekarji, and I was just saying, "Sir, when we are short of revolution, short of milk, we created white revolution. When we were short of wheat, we created green revolution. Then we were short of space ships because we used to go to other countries to launch our rockets. Now other countries come to us to launch our rocket. So we went in for blue revolution, and our sky is now laced with so many Indian spaceships." I said, "Today, now I am looking for gray revolution, where gray matter of every Indian will come out, have its existence, and let me repeat it, even if looking philosophical, whether you talk it multidisciplinarity, whether you talk it interdisciplinarity, whether you talk it quality, whether you talk it flexibility, all this was embedded in our system. We gradually forgot all about, and now we have to re-put it. And therefore, when you ask me a question, whether value system, if I define the value system in the little largest bracket, yes, that is the only option, and we have to go ahead. And my only request through this my NEP is, let us stop asking this question whether we need value system or not. Let us
Let us
take
start
the
building.
hypothesis that we need value system. उसके बाद किसी को नहीं अब लोग फिर भी चोरी करते हैं तो क्या करेंगे, कर लेंगे. The point is our culture is our value system. If you don't want to accept, it's fine. I mean, I've given you an example. We always say, don't steal, but somebody steals. We don't say tell lies. Somebody tells lies. Let the people do it. But if we go with the philosophy, first of all, let everybody commit to me that they will follow the value system. Then only I will introduce the value system. Things will not happen. I think let's take it as a given situation that value system is the system of this country. And value system, I repeat, is not religion. Value system is our system. And we'll go with that. And then only we can reach the top of the world, because education, and again, I'll say one thing. See, because today's entire value education system will develop from creativity. And creativity and value system have very strong
True.
connect.
Right.
I read a paper from one of the psychologists who says you can be creative only in a language where you can dream. And then he asks a question, is there anybody who dreams in English? You always dream in Punjabi, Telugu, Tamil,
On mother tongue.
Canada,
Right.
but you never dream in English. So if you
Right.
can't dream in English, how can you be creative in English? It's a basic wrong hypothesis on which we are working. And sooner we correct it, better it is if we want to be creative. Because without creativity and innovation, you cannot be Vishwaguru or whatever. Because Vishwaguru can only be one who can be innovative, who can be creative, and we have to go in that direction. And therefore, I'm given a long answer, but my summary is value system number one is a must. Number two, let's not start doubting ourselves on this.
Thank you very much, sir. Closing down on the discussion, you have given us wonderful time and wonderful insights. I'll go to the last question. On one side, we talk about multidisciplinary approach, and on the other side, we are trying to make institutions into either research institutions or teaching institutions, or I think the word affiliated goes, or to colleges, each working on in their own. How do we see this difference between the approach that we are looking at and segregating of higher educations into a different set of institutions by 2035? I mean, probably I may not have understood it properly, or my questioning is right when I'm asking you this question.
Well, Dr. Eddy, again, my interpretation also may or may not be right, but I personally believe this is a transitory provision
Right.
so that things take off. Because if we start believing, because we want to convert every college into a university, and if we expect same standards of a good research university from every college, that will not happen. And therefore, I think a transitory provision has been made that we have good teaching institutions. But then you will again recall there is a purpose, there is a provision of migration from one group to another group. And gradually we expect all degree awarding institutions to be good research also,
Multidisciplinary.
multidisciplinary and good research institutions also. But to give ourselves time, I think we have done this.
So thank you very much for your time. I'll take a few minutes to sum up what wonderful points you have said as a bullet point, so that it will be taken in a very interesting way by the listeners. The very first thing you said is all about not allowing inquiry as a very big problem over decades, and I completely agree with you. The person sitting before you is a living example of the same. But because in class 6, one of my teachers of natural science, I did ask a question, probably I should not have asked, but out of inquisitiveness, I did ask him. And the result of that was I got a beating I got a slap of it. And you believe me, sir, I stopped asking questions from then till date. So this has impacted me very, very intensely. And this was my own experience about that. I think you're very well said, sir. Children should explore themselves, and then inquiry should be the fundamental of any teaching learning process, without which any kind of education, I think, is a mere waste and wastage of time. Now, you were talking about STEM or STEAM as a philosophy as an inclusiveness, as a holistic, which finds solutions to interdisciplinary approach to find out really the solutions of the one. I think in that light, I would give you an interesting thing, sir. When we were looking at NSS, NSS has no boundaries, it spans all boundaries. I propose to have a multidisciplinary approach to identifying problems of the villages or the slums, and they be taken up as their minor major projects. And let there be, since NSS encompasses different combinations of children, they can explore doing a multidisciplinary approach. Again, the same thing, the compartmentalization doesn't allow us to think in those lines. Very well taken in that sense. It talks about, as you rightly said, technology should come to the hands of even a common man with plug and play models, user friendly, and then working on aesthetics and ergonomics is the one that one should work on to. The candid admission that you made on certain aspects is quite interesting, sir. I think the concept of faculty advisors, training them is a very, very important component, because I strongly believe a good teacher needs a strong, what we call training as compared to an IAS officer, because an IAS officer may be doing something to uplift the society, so on and so forth. Here is a candidate or he is a teacher who is going to shape the future of the every child. And to my mind, if he doesn't do his job for the 30 years, whatever he is doing, he is creating a genocide rather than really creating a problem to a single individual, so on and so forth. And then the way you suggested that JEE should consider changing the questioning pattern is quite interesting. It has to be considered in that light, because ultimately any society's upliftment is application of your knowledge, and without application of knowledge, no knowledge is so useful. When I say application of knowledge, is not only for the material world, for personal growth also, it has to be a wonderful thing to be worked on. I think at the last you were trying to say skilling plus self-exploration plus study of society should be the way forward in identifying grouping of subjects or degrees, rather than straitjacketing or putting them into different compartments. That I think is the ethos and the essence of the word STEAM, which should have been understood as it works out to be. On the front of NBA or the procedures, you have very well explained it. They're all self-explanatory. I don't need really to put in my words into it, stating that this is done, or that is done, or that is done. But then, yes, we all dream of value-based education to be the norm of this country, and quality is ensured. The procedures are ensured when one becomes a consciously aware child rather than a law-abiding child. And then, sir, certainly I'll put it this way. I was asking you before the interview, sir, should I tell you the questions beforehand? You said, let it flow as it goes. I think it was a wonderful statement, and the answers that you gave were flowing very naturally. And I'm indebted to all the time that you've given, sir. Thank you very much for giving the sermon that values, creativity, innovation go hand in hand. And I think and this knowledge that I've gained from you today is a wonderful knowledge. I also said it that I know you from the last 30 years. I know how you're going to speak. And as such, I know what are the questions I'm going to ask you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for all the time. I know that you're not well, but still, you gave almost 2 hours or more than 2 hours for this, and without any break. Thank you very much from the family of NEP. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, my Guru. Thank you. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, to both of you. We will end this session here. Thank you, sir, and thank you, Reddy, sir. Thank you, Agarwal, sir. We will have another session, Impact of National Education Policy on Medical Education. I'll join there. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'll share the recording once it gets prepared.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.